Right on cue. Well, today we have an excellent program, and I'm personally really excited about this session because it's food and sparkling wine. Who doesn't love that around the holidays? Traditionally, the College Alumni Association has a little holiday happy hour get together every year, and we do ask our participants and attendees to make a small contribution to a charity each year. And so we are asking folks, if you're able to this year, we know it's been tough to make a small contribution to one of the 4 charities that will drop into the chat shortly. And that's the NYU Emergency Relief Fund, Hetrick Martin, the Bowery Mission, or World Central Kitchen. All really wonderful charities that are stepping up in this very difficult year, and we hope that you can contribute. So today's program is all about sparkling wine and festive food, and I'm really thrilled to be joined by Stephanie Staab, who is another one of our board members for the College Alumni Association and just a force in the wine and spirits industry, and I'm really excited to introduce her. Stephanie is the Marketing and Business Development Manager at Avonsol Winery in Temecula Valley, Southern California wine country, and she's the founder of the Lux Sip. She was recognized with merit for blind tasting in the Wine and Spirit Education Trust Level 3 Advanced Winner in Wines. Stephanie holds an MA from STEINHARDT and a BA from CAS 02, and along with an MBA in Luxury Brand Management from ESSEC Business School in Paris, France. Stephanie, as I mentioned, is a board member for the College Alumni Association. So I'm thrilled to be joined by Stephanie, and she's going to kick us off with some education on how to open our bubbly, and then we'll move through the program of introducing the foods, and then going through the tasting program that Stephanie's designed. So Stephanie, I'll turn it over to you to kick us off with getting these bottles open.
Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the annual holiday party. I'm so excited to be here with Jessica. She's created these amazing appetizers, and I have curated a little wine pairing to go with it so we can learn a little bit more about champagne and sparkling wine. And again, my name is Stephanie, and I'm joining you from Southern California wine country. I'm very happy to be here tonight. So as I had mentioned in the notes for this event, I had given a couple suggestions of wines you might want to try, but you are free to open whatever sparkling champagne that you have available that you're interested in trying. And you can feel free to just try one. You can try 2 if you have 2. If you have any kind of fruit syrups or fresh fruit or liqueurs, at the end, I will show you how to make some easy cocktails, but you can use anything that you have on hand. So first of all, I wanted to say that champagne is my favorite kind of wine. I don't know if you joined us for the last class in the summer, Introduction to Wines, but I did have some questions on that. And champagne is just so special and so delicious. I did spend probably about 5 years living in France and learned a lot about wine while I lived there. And I did have the chance to actually visit Champagne in person and tour some of the champagne caves there, meet with some of the growers. So it was really interesting to see it firsthand. So one of the champagnes I selected for us to try is the Moet Imperial. This is a brut champagne. I'm going to show you how to open this, and then I'll let Jessica talk about our appetizers, and then we'll get on to tasting. I wanted to let you know, please feel free to sip on your champagne as we're going here. You don't need to wait for me. This will just be a fun, festive event, and let's just all feel like we're at the holiday party, mixing with each other and having the best time. Okay, so what is a myth about champagne opening? Well, we see a lot of times on movies that people open the cork with a big, loud bang. Now, this might seem really funny and exciting. It's accompanied by a bunch of champagne spilling out. but that's not actually the correct way to open it. So in the industry, what you're gonna learn is that you wanna open the champagne with no sound at all. That's gonna tell you you did a really good job. And you wanna be safe around other people. There is the equivalent of atmospheric pressure in here is the equivalent to a truck tire. So it's under a lot of pressure, and these can fly really fast, and they can really injure someone if they were to hit someone. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to look at our bottle, and we're going to look for on the foil. This part is the foil, and this is covering the neck and the top. So if I look on here, this is where I'm going to open it. So I'm going to pull this, and there's a perforation around the bottom, so it's going to open very easily, like so. Okay, great. So we have this, and right here, this is your cage. A lot of places will put a cute little topping on there. And here is where you're going to open it, right here. You're going to turn this 6 times, okay? So the way you want to do it is hold this down just in case. Get it on a level surface. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, loosen this up a little bit. And this is your cage. It's just a wire cage. That helps to keep your cork on there so it's not going to be exploding when you're storing it. Okay. I'm just going to take this off. I like to collect these because I think they're really cute. Okay. Now, another misconception is that people think you should be pulling the cork from the bottle. What you really want to do is to hold on to the cork and turn the bottle. Now, if you want to be extra safe, you can put a towel over the cork as well. So I'm just going to hold on to this with my hand, and I'm turning the bottle. Whoa, I didn't do it so quietly. But here you can see just a little hint of little fizz coming out. And that's what you want. You don't want any of the liquid to come out. When I have this nice cork, we set that aside. Okay, so step 1, we got the bottle open. So let's, before we move on to Jessica, let's get our bottle and let's pour ourselves some champagne into our glass so that we can taste it. Like so. Okay. All right, did you want to go through some of your appetizers, Jessica, and then I'll go back to doing the tasting?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Stephanie. And I hope everybody has their bottles open because now it's time to go over the food, and we always want to make sure we have that nice bright flavor of the champagne to go with our food. So we did send 3 recipes, which I hope a couple of you cooked along with. It was a nice variety of recipes to have some light bites when we have champagne or cocktails, really things that should be pretty easy to put together. But of course, that's my opinion. My hashtag is "It's so easy." So I might have been wrong, but I think we should have gotten some things that everybody could accomplish. So the first appetizer that I put together for everybody is a roasted squash with ricotta and honey. So the idea of this hors d'oeuvre is really to bring out some of the sweetness from the squash, accented by the honey, really tempering that with a nice neutral ricotta. Getting a really good quality ricotta is key here because it really is one of your main ingredients. This is really pretty much a 4 or 5 ingredient dish, and you want each one to shine. So the instructions for this did say that it was recommended for you to toast the bread a little bit. Now, in all honesty, I will say I couldn't find the wheat bread that I typically like for this. So I did use a pecan raisin bread. Again, this sweet note following through this particular dish. and didn't toast it because the nuts would have burned, and we don't want a bitterness to infuse in this dish. The other ingredient here was the sage. The sage is really meant to bring out the earthiness of the squash. And there was a note that you should not ever be garnishing with raw sage. So really critical piece, it'll basically just taste like velvet, weird velvet in your mouth. So you don't want that. If you're ever going to garnish with sage, you want to fry it very, very, very quickly and crumble it on top. So this is our sweet kind of vegetarian option. This is great to do with any seasonal vegetables that you have any time of the year. I've done something like this with tomatoes or mushrooms. You can do it without roasting and use peas on top. All of those combinations work really well for whatever's in season for you. So that's our first item. The second one is a totally different flavor profile, and this is for my pescatarians out there. Also for my keto friends, those that like a little low carb option. And this is our cucumber and salmon bites. Really the only step that you needed to do to cook for this was mix a little creme fraiche, lemon zest, and dill to make a little bit of a sauce that goes in between the cucumber and the smoked salmon. This dish is really meant to be that briny, salty, bright from the lemon, like really this sea and brightness. The cucumber is used as a base here because it's a little bit more refreshing than any kind of cracker. We have 2 bread canapes, so we want to mix it up with something that's a little bit more refreshing, and cucumbers have that natural water. It's going to really give you a very different mouthfeel compared to the other hors d'oeuvres that we put together today. The last one is our heartiest hors d'oeuvre, and that's what I called our open face steak sandwich bites. So this one was also the most labor intensive. This one called for you to caramelize red onions. I caramelized my red onions today, and after I stopped tearing, because cutting up 4 onions definitely made all the tears come, I cooked them down for about an hour and 15 minutes for them to really get a very jammy consistency. So you really want to cook them slow and low to bring out the natural sweetness of the onions. And then you're going to hit them with some red wine, some balsamic vinegar, and some Worcestershire sauce to really infuse even more umami flavor into those onions. Then we're going to top it with some very simply pan-seared skirt steak, and then arugula chopped up and put on top to give a little bit of bitterness. The recipe we sent along did also include some horseradish. I wasn't able to find my fresh horseradish that I like for this dish, but I added a little extra arugula to bring out that pepperiness. So really what I wanted to just share with everybody in general, as we think about canapes and hors d'oeuvres, you're really looking for a couple of things when you're putting things together. You want to think about texture. You want to think about crunch versus soft versus, if you're going to have, like I said, the cucumbers a little bit watery or crunchy. You're going to think about what it looks like. You want an array of colors on your table, both on each plate as well as on the table as a whole. And then you also want to think about how many different flavor profiles can you really put together in that one bite. So a canapé can almost be like all the things you can have on a dish for a meal in one single bite. And so that's what we're striving for. We're looking for sweet, savory, salty, sour, briny, and seeing how many of them can marry together in a nice little bite without the ingredients competing with each other and without it becoming too complicated. So I really hope that everybody was able to cook along with a couple of these. As Stephanie goes through, she's going to share a little bit more about why they might work with sparkling in particular. But if there are any questions about canapes, hors d'oeuvres, cooking technique, or anything like that, we can go back and forth and answer them throughout the program. But I do hope everybody enjoyed them. And I think we'll be able to share the recipes again with everybody as a follow-up after this. So thank you. And Stephanie, I will turn it back to you as we work through the program.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. That was awesome. So I just want everyone to know that I did make them. So let me show you my handiwork. How beautiful does that look for a holiday gathering? And you know what? We don't need to have a huge party. This would be so fun to do with your significant other, with the people that you live with. Even my little daughter is 2.5 and she's a huge foodie. So I'm pretty sure she'd be really into these salmon bites. But as Jessica said, it looks so beautiful on a platter and there's so many different colors and textures. But I would definitely agree that not one thing is competing for flavor over another. Has a lot of different variety of colors and textures. And it is kind of like, I do like your idea of saying that it could be almost like a dish you would have, but in a small bite. I really like that concept.
Did you use any of the little hacks that I sent over, Stephanie? Because not everybody has time to grill a skirt steak or to roast up the butternut squash or anything like that.
Well, I must say, I'm all about, I used to be super gourmet like you. Well, not maybe at your level, but I used to love cooking, but I find now I've been busier than ever during the pandemic. I've actually in wine country, we've been very busy. So I've been busy with that. And then having a toddler bossing me around all day, I did use some of Jessica's hacks. So let's see what I did. I definitely used some canned pumpkin puree. That seemed to work out great. And I just heated it in the microwave with the sage. And then I did, let's see, okay, let's see. I'm gonna show you up close. So here is my little pumpkin bite. And that is
did you add the sage in the microwave as well?
I actually did fry the sage because I'm a huge fan of crispy fried sage. It didn't take me long. I think that stuff was worth it. It tasted really good. And I have some fresh raw local honey on this one. So that looks really good. And I didn't even need to toast the baguette. It was fresh and it seemed really good. And then for the caramelized onion bites, that turned out great. I did cook the onions probably like an hour and a half and they smelled amazing in my house. And as Jessica said, if you just cook it low and slow, it's super easy and your house will smell so good. And you can even make more and use it for other things. And then I have this nice arugula with the horseradish, and that's a really nice touch. And I used a high quality roast beef that was already pre-sliced for me. So that was one of the hacks I used for that. And then I have this beautiful, my smoked salmon, which was pretty straightforward. And I used a microplane to make the fresh lemon zest. And being out here in Southern California, we have plenty of local produce just growing outside. So I got lucky with having a very nice fresh lemon to use for that.
Great, excellent. Well, that just goes to show everybody that you can really take shortcuts in these and still end up with really nice, high quality offerings for yourself and or guests when we can all have guests again. So, go ahead.
Yeah, so I can't wait to apply those concepts again in the future. Okay, so let me see here. I just want to let you know what I'm tasting. So as I showed you, we have a Moet, so that's a champagne. And then I have a Cremant from Burgundy. And so that is the Method traditional, but it's at a lower price point. But I'm gonna start with my Moet. Now you guys can taste whatever you are tasting. So I want to tell you about the first step that we do. We have a series of 5 steps we do to taste wine in the industry. It's called the 5 S's of wine tasting. So the first one's see. So I'm seeing it. Look at those beautiful bubbles. And this light straw color. So that is a nice color for champagne. See, usually you would swirl, but with champagne, you don't want to swirl because you don't want to waste your bubbles. So we'll skip that step. You're going to see, swirl, sniff, put your nose all the way in there. Now, the interesting thing about champagne is you're going to get really interesting aromas because every time one of those bubbles pops, it releases, I think it's like 100 chemical components into the atmosphere. And those are going to tell your senses basically the flavors that you're going to be tasting. So smells so good. I just love that smell. So, okay, we sniff, then we are gonna sip and then savor. So just take a little bit in your mouth and then you can kind of like swish it around a little bit like mouthwash, but a little gently so the bubbles don't like foam up in your mouth. Just take a little bit. Coat your mouth with it. And then savor is the last step. So, and this is why I love champagne. Like you can really savor that flavor because it has all those complex flavors in the wine. So one of the things that is very prominent in champagne and all sparkling wines is the acidity. So I think you could probably taste that as you are tasting this wine, that there's a lot of acidity, which kind of makes your mouth almost like you're drooling a little bit inside your mouth, right? So that's the acidity. And that's really key for food pairing. So champagne is actually pairs very well with a wide variety of foods based on that clean taste and that acidity. So something that's interesting about this is going to be a straw yellow color. You're going to get green apple and citrus fruit with mineral nuances and white flowers. So you're going to have that in your aromas and your taste. And then something very interesting about champagne, you're going to get kind of notes of like brioche, cereal, fresh nuts, and that's going to be from the yeast that's in champagne. So what's interesting about champagne that makes it different from other sparkling wines is it's made from 3 grapes only. They're going to be Pinot Noir, which is a red grape, Pinot Meunier, which is a red grape, and Chardonnay, which is a white grape. So it can be any combination of those 3 grapes. And obviously they're going to be pressed for a golden champagne. It's going to be pressed so that you just have the juice coming out without spending time with the skins, which is how a red wine or rosé would be made. So it's just the going to be the wine. Okay. So
while we're working through this, we do have a question about what foods go best with a brut champagne versus a prosecco or other varietals. Do you have perspective on what flavor profiles would work best for the different kinds of sparkling that we're tasting today and or others?
I do. So it's really interesting because there are so many different kinds of sparkling wine that you can get from different regions. So Champagne is actually a region in France. So something that's called Champagne is only made in Champagne, France. So everything else is sparkling wine. Champagne is made with a very labor-intensive process and it's sitting time on the yeast. So, and it has a secondary fermentation within the bottle. That's what makes it special. You do have other sparkling wines. Why I wanted you to try either Cremant or Cava is because they are also made in what is called the méthode traditionnelle, which involves a secondary fermentation in the bottle. And then you have something like Prosecco, which is going to be made in a very much less labor-intensive manner. That is going to get its sparkling in a stainless steel tank. So it's not going to develop as many complex flavors. Also, as I said, there were the 3 grapes that are used in Champagne only. Outside of Champagne, you will find different grapes being used. So you're always going to have that acidity and, like a citrusy kind of, or like light floral kind of thing. But it's going to be different kind of levels of complexity in your mouth. So I always say there's a lot of kind of modern pairings that a lot of sommeliers do. So there can be really wild pairings, like to go with the acidity, you can do fat and salt. So one fun pairing is like French fries. Some people say McDonald's French fries specifically. But traditionally, you can have like definitely this smoked salmon appetizer is perfect. Raw oysters are really good. A friend of mine and I in New York, every Thursday, we used to try a different kind of sparkling wine with oysters. It was really fun. But I always like to say to look what traditionally was paired together. So, for example, I remember being in Italy during the summer, and it's so hot there, and you're outside because there's no air conditioning. And we're sitting outside. It's super, we're under the shade of, I think it was like, some citrus trees, and there's a nice breeze going. And they served us a nice the appetizer of cantaloupe melon with a thinly sliced prosciutto over the top of it. So you had like a little bit of sweetness from the melon and the kind of like salty, fatty meatiness of the prosciutto. And that was served with Prosecco. And that was just like the most amazing pairing. And I just remember that it was just really inexpensive to get Prosecco in Italy. And people would just drink it a lot just as a refresher in the afternoon because it was just so hot there in the summer. And then in Spain, cava, what I was reading was like a really good pairing that I want to try. There's this traditional dish that's like a roasted country bread, and it's kind of like a little bit, I don't want to say like rough, but it's a little bit like hearty. And so there's a dish called it's like pan con tomate, and you take the bread, you rub some garlic on it and some fresh tomato and olive oil, and then that is perfect pairing with cava, or seafood is always really good too. So that would be pairing with that. And then with champagne, as I said, I love oysters. Actually, the steak and onions, that's going to be a perfect pairing as well. And I think with the horseradish and arugula, that's going to give it a nice little bitterness that's definitely going to go nicely with the bubbles. So you can experiment. I did want to let everyone know that we do tend to think of champagne as only for special occasions, maybe over here in the USA, but I did learn in France that you can have champagne throughout the year anytime you want. So I think it's fun to kind of just experiment with different flavors. I like to look online, and I'll just Google, like, you can Google champagne pairings, and then you can see like traditional champagne pairings, or like 10 wildest champagne pairings. And I think it's a really fun, especially now during the pandemic, what you can do is Google some pairings and then make an evening out of it, where you could get a bottle of champagne that you want to try. And then, like we did tonight, like make your appetizers or the meal, whatever it is, and you can have it with your champagne. And especially I like to try a couple different things so that you can kind of taste the different flavors and how they pair. So that's kind of a long
It's interesting that you mentioned that in France, you learned that, okay, we can have champagne whenever. I have a good friend that went to Champagne country and came back and said, champagne is not meant to sit on your shelf. It's meant to be drank. And you don't have to be saving that bottle for a special occasion and keep that 1982 bottle in the closet or something like that. Is that a true thing? Do Americans think about champagne a little bit maybe incorrectly? Should we be not keeping it in the back of our fridge or on a shelf for too long?
Oh, totally. I think so. Several reasons. Well, it's always fun. I think it's so much fun to have champagne, and it's so delicious and just unique flavor. And it's not, most of our houses, like unless you have a wine refrigerator, it's gonna actually not be that good if you keep it for a long time. And also, there's just like a lot of occasions that you could have champagne. I even remember being in Paris, and again, it was, we were outside of a cafe because, you know, there's not air conditioning and things like that. And they had a drink called a piscine, which means swimming pool. And it was like a glass with a large bowl. And it was a sparkling French wine with ice cubes in it. So I know that we would probably also over here think, oh my gosh, I can never put ice cubes in my champagne. I mean, I maybe not put it in champagne, but if you have like a less expensive sparkling wine, why not? You know? So anyway, that was just interesting to see that over there. But yeah, no, I think like, it's just funny. And also, I have found some websites, like I know sometimes if you just go to the store, you're just gonna see like, you know, the regular like Moet and Veuve Clicquot, which I love. But for me, especially working in the wine industry, I'm always trying to taste new things. So there's websites that you can purchase online, which is perfect for stay-at-home times. And often if you buy, it's either 3 or 4 bottles or sometimes 2, they'll give you free shipping to your house. And then you can try different things. So one of those is called Wines Till Sold Out. One of them is called Psalm Select. And another one is called Last Bottle. And so they're really fun to subscribe to, like if you're really into wine. So they're gonna have all kinds of wine, not just sparkling, but that's really fun. And actually I'll show you a couple bottles that I have gotten. So I know I had mentioned like if you wanna try something with, so this one has a Grand Cru. So you see up here, and then here it has a vintage. So most champagnes are non-vintage, which just means it's a blend of different years. If it's a vintage, that means the wine is only from that year. And then like I got this one. And those are all from online. So you can just find some really interesting wines online these days, and they'll have the tasting descriptions. So just take a chance and have it sent to yourself. And if you don't want, you know, a couple bottles, maybe you can give one as a gift. I do want to discuss vintage versus non-vintage, because in regular wine, reds, white wines, you're going to have a year on that label. So that's a vintage. Champagne, as I said, is a region in France. And it is at the north of France, and it's actually the upper limit of temperature where you can grow grapes successfully. I think it gets about 50 degrees Fahrenheit warmest, which makes it really tough for the grapes to ripen. But that's also what gives the champagne so much acidity, is because they do tend to be not overly ripe, and it's in that cold climate. So oftentimes you're going to have at the champagne houses, they're going to have maybe 100 different, like this bottle right here could have even 100 different still wines in the base. They call that the assemblage. So you're assembling wines. You have a master, you have a team of people who are going to taste the wine, and you have the master person that's in charge. And every year for something like this, for a Moet Imperial, right, you're going to want to have the same flavor year after year. So what they're striving for there is consistency in flavor. So what's interesting about that is that they have to kind of guess from these different wines that are going to be from different years and from different plots, vineyard plots. So they're going to have to put these all together into the master formula for the year. If it's like a very, very, very good year, then that's when you might decide to make a vintage out of it.
Stephanie, we do have another question specifically about how long you should be storing champagne or sparkling wine.
Oh, sure. I mean, if it's unopened, I mean, I think you can have it for a year. That's no problem. And then once you open it, I did want to show you, I really like these. So you can get this on Amazon. And so this, if you're worried like, oh my gosh, I might not finish, you know, a whole bottle. This you can put on your, on your bottle, like so. And it has this for the special lip that you have on a champagne bottle. And so you take it, push it down, so it goes over that. Then you can keep that in your refrigerator for a couple days after, and it will be fine as well. So yeah, it's not as scary as everyone thinks. Overall, I think wine doesn't have to be so uptight, and like your wine's going to be fine usually, you know. But if you're going to keep it,
worst comes to worst.
I'm sorry.
If worst comes to worst, you could always cook with it. People don't think that you can cook with champagne, but you can. You can actually cook with champagne and make sauces and risotto. So if you really can't finish that bottle by drinking it, you can always throw it in a new dish.
I know. I think that's a really good point that Jessica made. And you can do that with champagne or any wine. And as she said, like add a splash to cooking your onions, or add some to marinating your meat. And I even do it with fish. You know, you can put a splash in there. So there's so many things you can do with it. And even if like, I've even done that before, if like I opened a wine, I didn't like it. You know, it's just funny. There's a lot of French recipes that use wine, white wine and red wine. Even like a lot of sauces, maybe would use like a white wine. You can make a delicious fish with a sauce using champagne. That would be really good.
And I will caution, you should only be cooking with wines or champagne that you do enjoy drinking, because the flavor will come through. So don't think it's the bargain bin wine is the one you should be cooking with. It's okay to cook with good wine or decent champagne. Don't throw the whole very expensive champagne into your risotto, but good wine, good champagne, things you like the flavor of.
I totally agree with that. And the flavor definitely does come through. So, and then, you know, you can also sip a little while you're cooking. So it goes together great. All right. So I'm going to go on and pour the next bottle for me that I have, which is a Cremant from Bourgogne, which is Burgundy. So Burgundy is very well known for their Pinot Noir and their Chardonnay. In this case, we're going to have, this is going to be a sparkling. So normally they'd have a still. So this is our Cremant. So there's two ways you can pour the glass. I did pour the other one without telling you. You can either pour it in straight. We put a little, pour a little in the bottom first. Let the head go down like so. Then you can continue pouring slowly, because you don't want to get too many bubbles. Like so. All right, great. And the other way is you can tilt the glass if that works better for you guys. So let's see. So this is my Cremant. And this is my champagne. So you can do like a little visual. And actually, they're pretty close in color. My Cremant is actually lighter. There are 8 regions in France where they can make Cremant. So you're going to have different grapes used in different areas. And as I said, they'll use different grapes than champagne. So you're just going to get a little different flavor. But again, you can give it a nice snip. And this, the bubbles, that's a really good sign when you have a lot of very small, fast moving bubbles. Jessica did ask me earlier, does the shape of the glass matter? Well, yes, it does. So
people might have noticed I was drinking out of a coupe glass. I'll turn my camera back on. The difference of glassware that you can use, right?
Yes. So Jessica's using a coupe and I'm using a flute. So there are actually advantages to each. So if you have a flute, it's going to keep your you're going to keep your hands off of it, right? So you're going to have your hands down here on your stem so that you're not heating your wine up. This way, it's really beautiful. You can see your wine. You can see the color, you can see your bubbles. It's really nice. And it's going to keep the shape of that. It's going to keep the bubbles rotating and keep coming up to the surface where they will burst and you will get those aromas. Now, the advantage of having a wider bowl, you can use like Jessica, a coupe like that, or some people even will put it in a wine glass. If you're really trying to get in and get the aromas, it will give you like a larger surface area. What's going to happen is that your bubbles will dissipate more quickly because they do have that larger surface area that they are coming up against and popping, and it could end up getting like a little bit warmer faster. So that's just, it's just going to depend on, or also like if you have a small apartment and you don't want to have specialized glassware for champagne because you don't drink it that much, then you're totally fine to use a wine glass. What I will say for champagne and any wine is that the more thin, see, these are Riedel, which is my favorite brand. You can find them on Amazon. And I would say if you like wine, it's worth it to invest in a high quality set of glasses. And it can be, if you like red wine, you can get like, it will say on the internet, it will say like red wine or white wine. And some of them get very specific. Like if you're super into wine, you could have like, a different glass for every kind of varietal, but that gets a little crazy. But if you love champagne, then I would definitely say it's so worth it to get a set of flutes. And then you can just feel fancy too. Like even if you're just at home, as I said, trying your new bottle, you can feel really fancy while you're doing it, which I think always adds a lot to the enjoyment of what you're drinking as well.
So we have 2 more questions in the Q&A. One question is, why is the Cremant sold at a lower price point than champagne? And maybe more broadly, if you can talk a little bit about the pricing of champagne. I know I asked you before we got on about why my favorite rosé champagne of the same vineyard that I'm drinking, a Brut right now, was so much more expensive. So the pricing of the sparkling in general, but specifically the Cremant first.
Great. Well, thank you for asking that question, because that's something I really want to point out here. You're going to get a Cremant for around probably $20 a bottle, which is super budget friendly. And it is actually, as I said, made in the method traditional, but it is aged for less time on the yeast. So the yeast is what's giving us those really complex flavors. It's aging in the bottle in champagne for about 3 years. Usually, I read about a high-end offering by Dom Perignon that I don't even know how much it costs, but they said it ages for, it's like over 10 years on the yeast. So it's like you're taking up all that time in the cellar, because that's going to be at the champagne producer's property, not at your house at that point. So you're going to be paying more in general for the extra labor that's involved. And also, for example, when you have your champagne aging, right? So it's going to be there, it's with its yeast. After 3 years, they decide, okay, we're about ready to get this ready for the market. So it's going to go traditionally. It was in a, I don't know if you guys have seen photos of this. I saw it in person, but it's like an A frame and it has holes in it. And it's like a 45 degree. So they're like this. So basically at this point, your champagne is a cloudy color. It's not that beautiful, clear, golden color. And so what you need to do is separate the yeast from, because it's like kind of like throughout the liquid. So you're gonna, basically, you're gonna be turning it a quarter, an eighth to a quarter every day. And they used to have people doing this, right? So there was someone whose whole job is called like remouage or riddling. And a really good person could do 40,000 bottles in one day. and you do it every day. So that's like pretty crazy little trivia fact there. But you're gonna just turn it, and what's gonna happen is eventually 4 to 6 weeks, the yeast will come down here at the bottom. And then what they're gonna do is they dip it in, I think it's glycolic acid, something like that. It freezes it into like a little pellet. And then again, you have to have someone talented with this so that once they're gonna take that out, the pellet's gonna come out, but you don't wanna waste the liquid inside that you've been creating in here. So then you're gonna put in something called a dosage. Now that's gonna be a little bit of the still wine. So that's just gonna be regular white wine with sugar added to it. And that's gonna go in, and that will determine the final sweetness, dryness, or sweetness. Because even a brut does have, usually I think it's a 9 grams of residual sugar. So even if it's dry, it still actually does have some sugar in there. So as you can imagine, this is super labor intensive. To make the rosé, it's actually, you have to use Pinot Noir. So that's gonna be your red grape. And so you're gonna get a Pinot Noir that's had time with the skin. So you're gonna add that in. And apparently that's like a very tricky process of getting the right blend. So you have like the color that you want. And it does add a bit of like texture and taste to it. So like, I definitely recommend, if you've never tried it, a rosé champagne is so good. And I even want to show you guys, I found this Cremant rosé, and it looks so good. Like, look at that beautiful color. So I'm really excited to try that. So Cremant, why is it cheaper? Well, it's still using that method traditional, but it's going to be aging less time, not 3 years. So you're going to just have a little bit less complexity. But for me, I think it's so good because you do actually get the complexity of the aging with the yeast. They call it sur lie. So like, it's really, really fun to try because, as I said, it's only about $20 a bottle, where champagne's going to be, depends where you get it, but 40, 60, could be more if you get a vintage one. Those are really fun, like if you're really into champagne, but it could be $100. So you can definitely have fun with trying these different ones. And I just think it's more complex than, say, like if you're just taking, like, as I said with Prosecco, you have a big stainless steel tank and you're just adding carbonation. So like you're fermenting it in the tank, you're doing the secondary fermentation there. But it's just not going to be as complex as like these wines that are sitting on this yeast. I know it sounds so weird, but yeah, that's what actually.
It sounds a lot like we're paying rent for our champagne to take its time to mature.
And you'll find that with wine in general, it's like the more labor intensive the process, then usually that does end up coming out in the cost.
So Stephanie, speaking of more complexity in the drinks that we're having, and pardon the sirens, I am not in Southern California, I am in Midtown Manhattan, so this is what we get. There's a question in the chat about a favorite champagne cocktail, and I know that you're about to show us a couple of, fancy zhuzhes to our champagne and our sparkling, so why don't we move along to that portion and also share a little bit about your own favorite cocktail.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for asking that. I'm really excited. So I wanted to share okay, first of all, I want to say that I wouldn't necessarily, I don't want to say waste, but don't waste your champagne doing this. This is definitely better. You can even use, that's why, like, I don't know, for me, for like Prosecco, it's so boring. Like, I would definitely use that to mix all the time because it's like super cheap. But we're going to do it with the Cremant here. We didn't invest too much in that. But even so, as Jessica said, like, we want to use something that's still delicious. Like, we're not going to get anything gross or anything.
Yes, we're not at all advocating for any gross drinks or foods or anything tonight. So Stephanie's going to show us how to do this artfully.
Yes. Okay. So this is the first thing. This is a creme de cassis. So as you can see, it's little small berries. I found out about this when I was living in France. So again, cocktail hour, you know, like 3 in the afternoon. Everyone would go, you know, get a drink and sit outside and chat. And so they had a drink that was very kind of ubiquitous, and it was called a kir. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, but it's traditionally made with a white wine and the creme de cassis. So basically, this is like a sweet liqueur. And what we're going to do with this is add it to our crème menthe. Now, when we do that, it's called a kir royale because it's fancier than a regular kir. But you can use this. It's really nice because this lasts forever. So you can have this at home and you could make yourself a kir royale. You can also use it like over vanilla ice cream or with berries, something like that. So you can do a lot of pancakes would be nice. So if you guys have any kind of like a fruit liqueur at home, you can try this out. And what I like to do is take it. I don't measure it. I just kind of pour some in. So you're gonna pour it in. And then, let's see. Oh, all right, it mixed itself. There we go. You might want to like mix it a little bit, or you don't need to. But so for me, I don't like too much. If you want it like a little bit sweeter, so what I would do is just put a little bit in and then try it. So try it and then, you know, give it a little taste and then say like, oh, do I want it like a little bit sweeter? Yeah, I do. So then just put like, if you like a little bit sweeter, just put a little bit more in.
Stephanie, would you consider when you mix these liqueurs to be more of a afternoon aperitif or an after dinner cocktail, or it's, you know, dealer's choice kind of thing?
Well, for me, I think I'd like it, you know, more like probably in the afternoon or before. For me, I'd like to go to a dessert wine, I feel like, after dinner, because they're just such interesting ones. Like I'm really into like port, and there's other just really interesting ones. But you could do it either way, because say you're doing a dessert, this would be really good with a dessert. The rule of thumb for desserts is you want to pair something sweeter than the dessert. So you can make, this would be really nice, and the bubbles would go great. You know, I'm thinking like anything with berries would be so good because you have the berries in here, or even like something chocolate would be really yummy. So then that's one that I really like.
Do you have to refrigerate the creme de cassis? There's a question about that.
You don't have to refrigerate it. I just leave it out.
Now the champagne we do, and the cremant we want a little bit cold, but not ice cold, correct?
Right, so that's another point. Thank you, Jessica. We tend to serve our champagnes too cold over here. When it's ice cold, you're not gonna smell the aromas and you're not gonna taste all the flavors. So a rule of thumb is that you wanna let it just sit out for maybe like, you know, 10, 15 minutes. Let it warm up a little bit, or you can chill it instead of in your fridge. If you know, really want to be fancy, you could put it in like a bucket of ice, but that kind of takes up a lot of space. So I just usually put mine in the fridge. But you definitely, if you let it warm up a little bit, you're gonna get a better, more delicious experience out of it. You don't want it like warm, but just like a little, just not freezing cold. And I think even, you know, if you have it even in a like a wine chiller, you could be setting it out like while you're drinking it, and like of course while it's in the glass, it's going to be opening up during that time. So yeah, that definitely I learned in France, and people just drink it all the time there, and it's really good. And another thing that I thought I wanted to share with you guys that I really like, this is an elderflower liqueur. So you might have seen, like, if you go out in New York, maybe a cocktail with like Saint-Germain elderflower liqueur, and that's just like a brand that's pretty popular. So like this is like, it smells so good. It's like it's just like a really interesting unique, it's almost like honey and white flowers. If you've never tried it, I'd recommend, it's definitely worth a little splurge to get this. It's not too expensive. And that's gonna be really good. And again, do the same process, add it to your bubbly and taste it. I'm a fan of that more because like everyone has different tastes of like how sweet they like things. So instead of just measuring it, I like to just add a little, see if you like it. If you want it sweeter, then just add a little bit more. That's my rule of thumb.
It sounds like the elderflower would go really well with the honey and squash appetizer that we
exactly. That's totally what I was thinking. So like I would say the traditional champagne is going to be so good with, they're all going to go together. And that's another thing. Like if you have multiple glasses, I would recommend try these different flavors and then try them with your appetizers. And the way that we try food and wine pairings, this might sound weird, but you're going to want to put both in your mouth at the same time. So you're always going to take your wine first, and you're going to put some in your mouth, and you're going to taste it and evaluate it first, just by itself. Then you're going to want to take your appetizer, and so you're going to get your appetizer, and then take a bite of that, put it in your mouth, and then while you're still chewing that, put a little bit more of your wine in your mouth, and you will be blown away. I had a really interesting presentation by, it was America's first master sommelier, and he had learned everything he knew in France. And so he said his comparison is you wouldn't just take a French fry, eat it, and then take a scoop of ketchup. Like you put it in the ketchup and eat it at the same time, and then the flavors marry each other, and you get like a really good experience out of that.
And I would say this is another reason to try to keep your canapes relatively simple in the number of ingredients you use, because when you do the tasting, it's really going to accentuate one or more of those flavors. And if you have way too many spices and ingredients, you're going to miss that opportunity for things to really shine. So keep it simple, 4 or 5 different things that you're putting together, especially if you're planning some kind of tasting like this.
Yeah, I love it. That's really good advice. And then I wanted to say that here's another thing that I think is really cool is if you just have like a little bit of fresh fruit. So I have some raspberries here. You can take your sparkling and just put like 1 or 2 in there. And like, how cute does that look? So cute. So like, I think something that would be like really fun for brunch, right? And then just looks like really festive, and you see all the bubbles on the fruit. So that's another possibility too.
Stephanie, what about other more, more ingredient cocktails? I know I've made a cocktail where there was some gin involved and some juice and some simple syrup and then a little floater of champagne. What about those, and what's the benefit to using champagne in those kind of cocktails? Or should we be thinking about a different sparkling wine for things that start to get more complicated?
Oh yeah, no, I think that there's so many really interesting cocktails that you can do. And as you said, the variety is endless. So something that I like to do is just, again, go to your friend Google, and you can search. Sometimes what I like for inspiration is going to, like, if you have like a favorite bar or something, you can look at oftentimes they'll have their menu of, cocktails online, and you can see the ingredients. It won't maybe tell you the proportions, but you can easily play around with those. Kind of like I did with adding the syrup, like you can just add, what you think would go together, or you can also look up, recipes online and try to like go from the recipe that you found, but use ingredients that sound really good to you. And so also champagne is often used as a topper for cocktails, and even funny enough, so out here in wine country, it is so hot in the summer. It's like 110 degrees, right? So hot. So it's like kind of gross to be sitting outside trying to drink a red wine or something when it's that hot. So something that tends to be really popular in the summer out here is sangria, which is made with, various fruit juices. And I know we had a really popular one this past summer it was like a layered sangria, and they called it the sunset. And so it had like a yellow, like a white wine sangria bottom layer, and then a red wine layer. So kind of like looked like the sunset. And then they would top it with a sparkling wine, one of our local wines. And so it just gives it like that nice effervescence. And another cocktail that I love so much with Prosecco from Italy. I don't know if anyone's heard of the Aperol Spritz. Have you had that, Jessica? Oh my gosh.
Yep. It's a really great cocktail to start your meal with and prepare. I like to think of it as something that prepares your palate for what you're about to eat.
Yeah, so that's a really fun one because that's it's like a bitter orange alcohol, and then you mix that with Prosecco. And again, in that alcohol, that cocktail, you have ice cubes in it, and you have an actual slice of orange. So it just goes to show that sparkling wines are super versatile, and you can have them by themselves, but they are so good mixed with fruit juices, or like another famous one is the Bellini, which is, a sparkling wine with peach puree. So it's like a little bit thicker. But you can do all kinds of you can experiment, different fruit juices or a few fruit purees, liqueurs, or like I did here with just like a little fresh fruit accent.
I highly recommend if anybody does want to experiment with different juices and things. There was a cocktail that the restaurant The Smith in New York was serving one season that had pomegranate juice and some gin, and it was topped with some Prosecco, and it was a really nice kind of seasonal, transitional kind of beverage. Tangerine juice is also a really nice one to pair together. Just some personal preferences there. But we're definitely open for more questions if any of the participants have any questions. We did have one interesting question, I think, Stephanie. I had never heard this before, but Hal tells us that he's heard if you stick a spoon in a bottle of champagne, it'll keep it bubbly. Is that true? Have you heard this one?
Well, I guess I've never really seen anyone do that. I would just think that that would just be kind of like maybe agitating the bubbles, to keep moving. But I don't think you necessarily need to be putting spoons in your champagne. As far as I know, I don't know. I haven't seen that happen so far.
Any other questions from our participants? I know, Stephanie, you also know a lot of trivia about champagne. You already shared that there's enough pressure that it could, fill a car truck tire. How many bubbles are in a bottle of champagne? It's a little piece of trivia I've always been curious about.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you. That's a great question. So let's see. Let's get our actual champagne over here. So it's the same size as a regular bottle of wine, 750 milliliters. Funny enough, before the yeasts are gone, it's just you're gonna have that carbon dioxide. And so once you finally do that and get your dosage in there, get your bubbles, you can have 100 million bubbles in your bottle. So it's like kind of mind blowing to me, but that's why you're gonna see, like, when you look in your glass, you just have like the thin, that one, no, my fruit in there. Let's see if we can see this. That's a little dark. Anyway, you're gonna see the best ones have so many bubbles, and they're gonna be very small and fine. And that's gonna come from a long aging and from aging in a cool place. And so interestingly enough, in a champagne, it's all actually to this day aged underground in these caves. And I actually went to, when I was in Champagne, I got to take a tour of Moet and Dom Perignon. They're made by the same people. And so we got to go in the underground caves, and it was just so fascinating because it was dark and it was damp, and it's all just like stones everywhere. And they would have these like archways, and they would just be stacked up with bottles. and they didn't have the labels on them at that point. They just had like a chalkboard above where the bottles were stacked, and it would just say the year. So it was just crazy. And they're like little mushrooms growing out of the walls and like water dripping down. And it's just, I think that's one of the things I love about champagne so much too, is that it's just, it's such an old method. And that, you know, in France, everything's still just done, you know, by hand and the traditional way that they've always done it. And so I feel like maybe in California or other places, you have a lot more experimentation. Even out here, it's like we have different flavored sparkling wines, you know. So a lot of people find that really fun and everything. But I guess what attracts me to French, especially champagne, is that it's just been done in a certain way for so long. And it's like, it always has those like successful results. And, you know, so like you always know you're going to get something that's going to be really amazing.
So Stephanie, you've talked about how labor intensive some of the different champagnes can be, and that can affect cost. Do you know what the most expensive champagne is? There's one of our participants is curious if you have that information.
Oh my gosh, I don't know, because I was just, you know, doing a little bit of research the other day, and there are some, you know, champagnes that, you know, like we would never even see, like you won't even see them in a store, for example. And maybe they're just made specially by the house for, you know, specific like companies or special people or whatever. I remember when we were touring the caves, they had it was a Magnum, which is a double bottle, and it was a Rosé Dom Perignon. And they said, oh, like we don't even sell this. They were making it specially for, I don't even know who it was for, but it was like, they were making it special for someone. So unlike this champagne I was reading about that might be left on in the bottle on the yeast cells for 30 years, I can't even imagine, you know, what that's going to cost. So it's really crazy, not only with champagne, but with the world of wine in general. It can really get crazy, and there's wine auctions, for example, and you'll just see like thousands of dollars, you know, on a single bottle. And so it can just be really mind-blowing that, you know, like I definitely am not drinking those kind of wines. But, you know, for some people, there's people out there that, you know, collect different wines and are able to try these different things.
So it sounds like priceless is the answer to the most expensive bottle that's out there. But we do have a question about those that are attainable to anybody. What is your favorite cost-effective champagne versus a higher-end champagne? Do you have recommendations on each side of the spectrum?
Yeah, well, that's funny. So, oh my gosh, it's kind of hard for me to say because, as I said, I just love trying. For me, I just love trying small producers and things that are interesting and different. As I said, like I, you know, will often buy wines from the internet, or there's a store which is national, could be, you know, close to where some of you live, called Total Wine. I definitely recommend going there because their salespeople are super knowledgeable, and they have different sections with interesting finds, and they even do have like, you know, rare wines that are like $4,000 available, but then they have like the cheap ones too, so they have like the whole spectrum, but it's like very like thoughtfully curated. So I'd say for me, like, okay, if I'm having friends over and I want to serve champagne, my go-to is Veuve Clicquot, and where I live you can get it at Costco for like $45. So I think that that's a really good price point for a champagne. And like, I think that one's like really flavorful and nice and crisp. Plus I think the label looks really cool. I like the orange label.
I'll put in a bid for my favorite, which is what I'm drinking tonight. I do prefer the rosé, but the Brut is equally delicious. And this is about a $50 bottle of champagne.
Yum. I just had a Bollinger the other day. That's about in that price range. That was like really, really flavorful. That was good. One that I really, really like, I never buy, but I did have the opportunity to taste it a lot during my MBA is Krug. Um, that one, I think is like $100 a bottle, but don't quote me. But we got to taste a few different Krugs. We actually had a luxury alcohol class, and it was led by Remy Krug, who is the last family member to lead the Champagne House before it was sold to LVMH and became part of their portfolio. And so it just was really cool hearing all of his family stories. And we got to taste, some of the Krug champagne. So I'd say like probably from what I've had, that was definitely my favorite. Really good. And then as far as the budget ones, I'm really, really into Cremant because I just feel like people don't know about it. I personally didn't know about it until I worked in the wine industry. So even living in France, I wasn't really aware of Cremant. But I think you can find it at stores because, as I said, it's like, it comes from like 8 different regions in France. And I think that that's a really good, it's like $20 a bottle. And you can try, there's different areas like the Loire, Bourgogne, and they're going to all be a little different, but like, as I said, they're made in that traditional method. They have the complexity of flavor. As I found, you can even get a rosé. So I would say, try to go find some of those Cremants if you want to try something that's interesting, that's going to be, at a lower price point so you can try it more often.
Those are great suggestions, Stephanie. There's one question that we had from Liz, who said that she's heard that wine from France loses some of its flavor coming over to the U.S. Is that true by your account?
For me, I don't think that I've experienced that. Because I did, I don't know if I could compare my taste buds of like 10 years ago and what I'm tasting now, but everything that I'm tasting is super flavorful. And even at home, I really like to drink, I love drinking red and white still French wines, and they're really nice because they tend to be a little bit lower in alcohol than like our California wines. Southern California tends to be like super high in alcohol because it's like very hot out here. But like, so you're going to have like cooler climates. And as I said, like Champagne has like super cool climate. You're only going to have like 12% alcohol in a Champagne versus, even out here in California, you could have like 15% in a red wine. It's just so hot. But yeah, no, I think you're safe. Don't worry. Like your wine is going to taste good. You don't have to go to France just to drink it.
although there's no harm in wanting to travel to France for a wine tasting.
I definitely recommend, take the trip and see if you can taste the difference.
So we have actually a really good question here from Mike. And I know we've talked a little bit about the sparkling rosé, both Champagne and Cremant. What about red wines, sparkling red wines? We haven't talked about that at all tonight.
Yeah, there are some sparkling reds. They tend to be less common, I would say. I think one that I've had that was super interesting is called Lambrusco. And it's a sweet, sparkling red. If you can find that, it's really fun to try. But there's no like red champagne. Even though 2 of the grapes that make champagne are red grapes, how you make red wine is you're going to soak the wine with the skins, and then that takes out tannin and flavor and color. But that's not how they do it with the red grapes for champagne. They just simply press it and then take the juice away from the skin so they don't spend time together. But yeah, the Lambrusco is a very, very interesting one to try, and it's also budget friendly. It's not very expensive.
Another good sparkling red is a Bracchetto, also harder to find than the Lambrusco, but also a sweet dessert sparkling, very popular at Italian restaurants. I think the red sparkling, it's more of an Italian than a French option.
Yeah, the only ones I've seen is Italian, and then I have seen like one. It wasn't. I think I've seen one in California, but it was trying to be like an Italian one. So yeah, but it's not that common, but it's definitely, if you can find it, it's fun to try.
So we have a bunch more questions coming in. A specific question, I think you were talking a little bit about chalk labeling and laid in chalk. Cassandra has mentioned she has a bottle that says on the back of the label, laid in chalk 2009, disgorged 2017. And she's wondering what that means.
Okay. That's funny. So I did read that, some producers were trying to do like the disgorgement date. But yeah, it does sound like probably that's when they laid it down to rest. And then it was resting. And then the disgorgement is, as I said, it's once you, after you've twisted your bottles. And actually that happens by generally, apparently now it's happening by machine, which can do it 24 hours a day in the perfect way. And it's done in a week instead of 4 to 6 weeks. But anyway, so the disgorgement date is going to be when that pellet of yeast comes out. They're going to put the dosage in there. That's your wine with sugar. That's going to give it, up to the sweetness level that it's going to be. They're going to cap it. And so that's going to be the date that they, that it was like this. When you buy it, the way it looks like that, that's the date. So 2017. So basically you've had the bottle for 3 years. So you're probably going to want to drink that, I would say. Yeah.
There we go. Well, that actually brings me to another question where Elizabeth did have a question about keeping a bottle of champagne longer than a year. And is there a downsize if we save a bottle for too long? Again, refrigerated, not refrigerated, I'm not sure what the status of the bottle is, but.
Well, basically, when you're going to buy champagne at the store, it's ready to drink now. So the producers have done all the aging for you. So holding on to your champagne is not going to make it better. So for me, I don't think there's a reason to hold on to champagne. Like I'd rather buy it closer to when I'm going to use it and then use it. Because it's not going to get better. Like you're not really like aging it and make it more delicious by keeping it longer. So, I mean, it should be fine. Like just go ahead and open it when when you're planning to. And I think it will be fine, but there's not going to be like a value to making your wine better if you're going to hold on to it.
New Year's is coming, folks. So pop those bottles.
2020.
There you go. We have a question from Joseph. We've talked a lot about French champagne and Cremant. We tapped into Italy a little bit. What about California sparkling wines? How do they compare and what are the notable differences?
Oh, great. Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for asking. So working out here in California, what I've seen is that it's very creative out here. And so whereas in France, it's and other places, even Cava, Spain, everywhere, they're gonna regulate like what are the grapes that you use for certain kinds of wine. And you can only use those grapes. And it's also based on geography. So it has to grow within a certain location. And that's going to be going into the labeling. If it's outside of that location, you can't label it as a certain thing. If you didn't use the right grapes, then it doesn't count. So in California, we don't have those regulations. So for example, you might notice that Napa is famous for Cabernet Sauvignon, and they're like super expensive. They just all decided, that worked well there, and they were going to be famous for that. So like you'll have, 200-acre vineyard that's only Cabernet Sauvignon. Down here in Southern California, we tend to be it's very creative and almost experimental, I would say. So a lot of, people might have, for example, where the winery that where I work is 22 acres, and you have 5 different kinds of grapes planted there. So like you're gonna have like a lot smaller, maybe plots of different types of grapes. So I know like we had a sparkling that was really interesting that people really liked. It was a Viognier, which is an interesting aromatic white wine. It's like tends to be a little bit heavier, and it was a vintage. So it was all 2017. And so like we can do vintages, I would say, more easily out here if we want to, because we don't have that temperature problem that they have in Champagne, where they're trying to like, hedge the years of, is it going to be too cold? Will it not be flavorful enough? But anyway, so, and it was like kind of like an off dry, and people really liked it because it was, like not really sweet, but not really dry. And like, it kind of like went with like all different kinds of foods and occasions. So we did that. And then, but there's another like local winery here that they actually became famous with, they call it almond sparkling. And so they do like an almond one, a Bellini flavored one, they have all these different flavors. Then there's another place that has one that's infused with like orange peels, since we have like all the citrus around here, and it's a little bit sweet. I feel like well, I guess you have two categories. You have like the ones that are like that are kind of like more like sweet and fun. And then there's another winery locally that has started, well, there's a couple that do the method traditional, like in France. But I'm not sure how long they age them on the yeast, but there's some that are definitely trying to be like a French wine. And there's some that are really, really good. So it's like, I feel like we have a lot of variety here in California, and it doesn't just conform to one kind of grape or one kind of style.
And I know that's out in California. There's a question if there's any comment on New York State wines. Does New York State produce any sparkling wine that's of note, or is there a particular characteristic that they have out here?
Wow, New York, I know most of my New York wines from the farmers markets in Union Square, because I did live in New York for like 15 years before coming back to California. But I don't really know of, I'd say definitely, well, I guess we don't have a farmers markets going on, but like a local store, like if you have a store that carries local wines, because we do have a lot of that out here, and even Total Wine has a lot of local California wines. So I think if you could find a store like that in New York and go visit it, you could find and try local wines, because I think it's so much fun. The French have a term called terroir, and that means that when you're tasting your wine, you're tasting all the environmental factors of growing the grapes and all of that, from the soil to the sun to the rain. So I think that you could really have fun trying to find some local wines, but there's nothing that I know of off the top of my head that's like very, well known to me, at least, for sparkling in New York.
Yeah, on the sparkling, I know up near the Finger Lakes, we have a big the sweet white wines, and out on the east end of Long Island, there's obviously a big wine scene, particularly during the summer months.
Yeah.
Great. So I know we're almost at time now. We have about 5 minutes left. I see one or two more questions in here, and then I think we'll end up wrapping up and try to stay close to the 7 o'clock time. A question that we have is about climate change, and how is climate change changing the locations that are regulated in Europe for where Champagne or Cava can grow? Do you have any insight into that, Stephanie?
Wow, that's a super interesting question, and thank you for asking that. So climate change is pretty crazy because, for example, in Southern California right now, it was almost 80 degrees today. Like, it is so warm, and it's like it hasn't really even gotten cold here yet, and it's December. So that's just so crazy. Out here in California, we're allowed to use irrigation, which is additional water that we have like a dripper system so that each vine gets drips of water. But in Europe, you're mostly going to have where you're not allowed to use additional irrigation, for example. And so like if with the weather, like the rain gets thrown off and they don't get enough rain for the year, you could have like a less yield of grapes. Or if it starts getting hotter and your grapes get too ripe, and like you might have your style of wine might not be the proper style. I mean, I guess like this would be, you know, oops, sorry, in the future, like this could, it could be, if it gets extreme, it could be like that, you know, if we're basing, if people are still basing their rules on, you know, the way things have always been. Some people say, I don't know, that maybe it would open up different varieties, could be grown in different areas. But as far as I know, things are staying the same as they, you know, the regulations that they always were for the location and the farming methods and the types of grapes.
Great, great. Well, I don't see any other questions now. I know we are at about time. I want to encourage everyone again to, if you can, again, we know it's a tough year, but if you can, please make a donation to one of the 4 charities. We'll be resending out the links to everybody. And I will also just throw in a little surprise at the end for those that attended. And Heather and Anne-Marie, I hope that you'll be able to follow up with me. I did write a cookbook during quarantine, and I am raffling one off to one of the participants from today. So I will make sure that we send that out. And Anne-Marie and Heather, hopefully you can help me with raffling and picking a name, and we'll be able to send one of the books out to everybody. The salmon recipe is in there, and as well as 70 other recipes, soup to nuts. It's not for sale, it's just on Shutterfly. So it's just a little special gift. So hopefully somebody will enjoy that. But in the meantime, I know we hope that you all have a wonderful holiday season, a happy, a healthy new year. And I want to really thank Stephanie for giving her time and expertise once again. We're going to have to figure out another one for next spring, I think, Stephanie, and find another take on these to give everybody. But I think it was a wonderful program. I learned a lot from you as always. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. I had so much fun, and I had so much fun trying your recipes, because I feel like I've been kind of, you know, making the same thing all the time in my COVID time here. But I think that's so fun that you're going to raffle off one of the books. And I just want to thank everyone so much for attending. And I hope that you guys have the best time over this holiday season, just, you know, appreciating what we have and, you know, our families, and, you know, hoping for positive things in the future. And I'm just so happy to be able to spend this time with everyone. And thank you for tuning in and joining me for learning about sparkling wine.
One of these days, Stephanie, we will do this in person for whoever wants to join us.
Oh, that would be fun. I love it.
Well, Stephanie, as always, great working with you on another great event. Thank you again, everybody. Again, happy, healthy, and we'll see you in the new year, hopefully with some new wines and food options. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.